Well, by my watch, that's 1/2 past, so I think that if others want to join, they'll miss the brief introduction to myself. Hello, thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate that this is just after lunch, and so I will try and keep this upbeat and interesting. But what I'd like to do today is to talk through the ACS publications experience that we've had with the read and publish agreement that we signed with the consortium in Thailand. To introduce myself, my name's Christopher Pym. I work in the ACS Publications Open Access team. My day-to-day role is I do funder relations, but alongside that, I also work with consortia around the world, trying to understand how best we can support them through the transition to open access. So I think probably the best place to start, having introduced myself, is to introduce ACS. So we are the publications division of the American Chemical Society, which is the world's largest membership organization in science. We're headquartered in Washington, DC, but we have offices around the world, including in the UK, in Singapore, in China, and so on. In terms of what we do, we currently publish just over 90 journals. We get about 250,000 submissions a year and publish around about 80,000 articles from that. So we may not be quite as substantial as the Elsevier's and Springer Nature's of this world, but for a society publisher, we are large. We also publish around about 6 peer-reviewed book series. And so, as well as journal publishing, we're also involved in ebooks. But for the purposes of today, we're going to look at open access in journals primarily, well, exclusively. So why should we care? What is it about open access that is potentially useful? What problems does it solve? Ultimately, by removing articles from the restrictions around access, it means that more people can read that research. If more people can read it, that means that that research can be implemented more rapidly, and so we can use it to drive solutions to the many, many significant problems that the world has today. So, for instance, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It also means for research funders who are paying for this research that because people can access the research that they, or ultimately taxpayers or philanthropic organizations, have paid for, that can be put to actual use rather than just being a purely intellectual exercise much faster. That means that it widens the benefits. So faster, wider, but there's also, with all of those great selfless advantages to open access, there are also some very selfish advantages as well. And so you have both the moral and ethical benefits of open access, but for an individual researcher, there's lots of evidence to suggest that open access is associated with additional citations. And so for institutions and for researchers, it can help them increase their exposure, develop new international contacts, and thus accelerate, as part of open science, accelerate the entire research process. And as I mentioned, citation advantage, this is something that's been looked at for over 20 years now. And so these days it's called open access citation advantage. But previously it was called full text online, and I always just like the abbreviation FUTON. I find it sounds nicer than... So in terms of some of the evidence that is available on open access citation advantage, over the 20 years of study, there are lots. And I know that earlier on today, Springer Nature gave a similar presentation to this, looking at some of their experiences with transformative agreements. So I thought that as a hat tip to them being first, I would mention that Springer Nature in about 2018 published a white paper looking at open access citation advantage across their hybrid journal portfolio and found that there was a significant benefit. Other studies from non-publishers, including the European Commission, have seen increased citation rates of around 40% over closed access articles. And studies would also say that that effect is most pronounced in hybrid open access. If you're interested in looking at this in a bit more detail, there is a great article in PLOS that is a meta-analysis of 171 studies that they chose to include, I think, that published in 2021. And that, again, shows that the majority of those pieces of research found an advantage associated with open access. But the corollary of there being an open access advantage is that if everyone else is open access, there is a closed access disadvantage. And so that's something that's worth thinking about as the world moves towards an open access future. So in terms of institutional agreements, to give you a brief overview of what they are, what they intend to do. The idea is to attempt to reuse subscription money in order to open up the articles that are published. So it's kind of the exact opposite of double dipping, where we're trying to reuse the money for two separate things. The benefits, no author level APCs. That tends to take away some of the concerns around, I would like to publish this open access, but I can't afford to pay for an APC. And depending on the flavor, the mechanism that has been set up for an agreement, it can be based normally on gold open access, but we also have examples at ACS publications where we have institutional agreements, particularly in the US and France, that are based on embargo-free green open access as an alternative route towards OA. So for the example today, the Thailand Consortium. It's a gold open access agreement, so it's open access in the journal immediately on publication. It covers 79 institutions. It started not quite 2 years ago, and that's important as we come on to look at some of the data that I'll be presenting, because some of the indicators that we'll look at, like citations, are lagging indicators, and so we may not have seen benefit coming through yet. And of course, the idea behind this was to increase the visibility and the potential for citation of Thai research. So, given the lagging nature of some of these indicators, I thought I'd start off with some internal data. This is looking at submissions, and you can clearly see that we have an increase in the number of submissions. It was increasing before the agreement, but putting an agreement in place accelerates that rate of change. OA is a significant factor in the choice of publishing venue for lots of authors, particularly for early career researchers who may be more ethically aligned with the goals of open access. But that's not to say that there aren't other factors that feed into that as well. Certainly for promotion and tenure decisions, if that's based on impact factor, citations, that kind of thing, then those will also feed into the decision about which journal should I publish this in, as well as do I have a PI who's an editor at this particular journal, and so on and so forth. So given that that is live data, and so we know that we've seen accelerated growth in terms of submissions. We're now going to move on to look at data that I've taken from third-party service, in this case, Digital Science Dimensions. This was taken before the end of last year, so it's also missing some data, but it should give you a bit of an idea about what we're seeing. So the chart is very small, so I will try and explain it to you. At the, do I have a laser? No. I'll come around this side. So each of these lines represents a different access type for the articles. This one shows all open access. And you can see that publication grows incredibly rapidly in our open access portfolio or in our hybrid journal portfolio, whereas this line is showing closed access. So we're seeing people moving away from subscription-only access through to open access, which is exactly what an institutional agreement aims to do, is to open up research at a high level. In terms of actual publications growth in 2025, and again, this is taken from internal data, not from Digital Science Dimensions, we had 80%, over 80% of the research output from Thailand was immediately open access, which is fantastic. We do include some others, so this line here shows gold open access, including hybrid gold, and so you can see that big uptick between 24 and 25 as articles fed through peer review were accepted and then were published gold open access. And that's driven, as I say, an overall over 50% growth in the number of publications from the Thai consortium. So again, showing that people submit more because they're more aligned with the intentions of open access, and that grows through in submissions and filters through to publications. Citations. Remember, citation lag, and also the fact that there will be indexing lag when we're taking information from indexing services, because they may not include all of the articles that have been published. But we see that citations between 2020 and 2024 grew remarkably, with an acceleration in the number of citations coming around the time that the read and publish agreement came into place. That, particularly when you're looking at gold open access only, that is partially explained, of course, by the fact that there is just more gold open access available, and so even if every article only accrues one citation, there are more articles. But we would anticipate seeing that building and increasing over time as the citation window lengthens. So we're beginning to see early indications that this is more cited. We know that there's more publications, and this is all great that this is available for all to use. So let's just quickly take a look at an international comparator. So for this case, I wanted to use a research-intensive nation, and so I picked South Korea. Over the same time period as we looked at, where Thailand saw 74% growth, South Korea saw -5%, so a decline in their research output. It's worth noting that in the round, so across all publishers, South Korea publishes around about 12%, I believe, of its STEM output is open access, in hybrid journals, I should say. And again, with citations grew at a much slower rate than they did in Thailand. So this seems to indicate that as well as offering the moral benefits that many early career researchers like, there is also an advantage to publishing through open access, potentially through agreements such as this, in terms of growing citations faster than international comparators who don't have access to those type of agreements. So, points of interest. For South Korea, closed access article citation counts are showing slow or negative growth. Is that driven by lack of access to the wider community? That would require a significant amount of bibliometric study that I am not capable of doing, I will be the first to admit, but certainly something that I'm sure there are bibliometricians who are looking at. The growth rate of open access citations and output, certainly in these examples, but also in the Springer Nature presentation that was given earlier on today about their experiences with read and publish agreements, including in Malaysia, would seem to find the same effects coming into play. And that could be because of any number of reasons, but I mean, it's very hard to get away from the fact that it is hard to cite something that you can't read. I may have been guilty of that in my somewhat short academic career, of the abstract says so, so I'll cite that. But you probably shouldn't be doing that if you're receiving significant funding from a government or a philanthropic organization. And with this, we can also see, and this adds to the significant body of evidence that would suggest that open access agreements, so publishing agreements, enhance open access uptake with researchers. And I'm sure we could look at any publisher that has experience of this type of agreement, look at their data, and we would see the same. So, as a very quick summary, the Thailand Consortium has seen increased growth in publishing output. Great, more research out there. Over 80% of that in 2025 was immediately open access. That potentially has driven growth in citations. We'll wait and see as the citation window lengthens. And certainly based on the evidence from other countries where we have read and publish agreements, that is what we see. And the Thailand Consortium has outperformed growth compared to international research-intensive comparators, which again is a good thing for Thailand. So, to summarize, we have produced a research piece, would be overselling it. It's a blog piece that looks at the data around this that is now available on our Axial blog. If you scan the QR code, then you'll be able to read that. We also have a copy of the QR code on our stand in the exhibition. So if for some reason you're not able to scan this, you can always come to the stand and we can help you out there as well. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be delighted to see what I can do to help. Hey, Aditi.
Just what do you think of the competition with Thailand, or do you have similar examples in the
So we picked Thailand because we're in Thailand. And also because it's a relatively recent transformative agreement that we have in place here. And so it means it's easier to demonstrate where there have been changes because you can see the legacy growth and then you can see the impact that you have. But yes, we've seen this not just at ACS publications. This is something that I'm sure that Nicolo will have seen with agreements that Springer Nature have signed. I'm sure that Elsevier would be able to point to the same thing. I'm sure that other society publishers, including the Royal Society of Chemistry, as a similar publisher to us, certainly in terms of discipline, will also be able to point to the same kind of changes in publication output, volume of open access, and then once you have a longer citation window, you can begin to actually analyze that in terms of what is this doing in terms of the citability of this research. So yeah, in terms of why it's Thailand, it's because we're here. Yes, there probably are. And I would refer that to my colleagues who are in the exhibition today, who may be able to give you other examples. For the purposes of this, I did the very quick and dirty analysis that I've just shown you, and so I picked two nations. Yeah, no, I think that this is a fairly universal trend across the board. Even in wealthy nations, so like the wealthiest of wealthy nations, so if we look at Switzerland and we look at the United States, when agreements are put in place, you see an increase in the volume of open access publishing, because even if you have easy access to the funding to pay for APCs, there are other barriers. It's another administrative task that you have to go through because you say to the publisher, I'd like to publish this open access, then you have to manage the payment of an invoice. And if you take that administrative burden away, that also has an impact on how people will choose to publish. Depending on the way that an agreement is set up, we can default to it being open access, so people who just don't care will end up publishing open access rather than closed access, which again lifts the number of people that choose that. So you can set agreements up in a manner that maximizes participation, but at the same time while ensuring that we also continue to offer researchers academic freedom to choose how and where they publish. So if they do want to publish in subscription-only access, that they have the option to do that. Okay, thank you.